Well, good morning. I am always happy to be back here. I just got a text from my son reminding me that it's not fair that I'm here and they're still in Africa. Partly because he loves to see everybody. I think there's an ulterior motive that has to do with Legos and Walmart. But nonetheless, I'm happy to be back here. I was joking earlier that I'm not used to speaking in a setting like this, where there's, proper pews and a microphone, and I'm not being translated, and there's no animals coming in and out, and there's also a time limit. So if I get over time, I think the appropriate thing is, throw small things at me, not heavy preferably, or cough, and I'll try to close up, but hopefully I'll be succinct and clear. I tend to have a very wandering style of speaking. Hopefully, as I circle around, I'll eventually get to a point by the end. But let me start by just going back to the beginning. It was 9 years ago. Jen, my wife, and our son Christian and our daughter Ava were here. It was probably the only other time in this church that I've worn a tie. And we had our children dedicated. Our daughter was about 2 months old. Our son was about 2.5. And about a month and a half later, we were commissioned and sent out as missionaries from the church. We work with YWAM, which is YWAM. It's short for Youth with a Mission. We're based all around the world, but our primary training center is in Kailua Kona, Hawaii, which, for those of you who remember Pastor Seeley, as we were walking through this process, he was kind of looking at me saying, Hawaii. So suffering for Jesus on the beach, is that it? And he was a part of that process, among other things, in that he sent their daughter Carla to help us with our kids while we went through training, so she also could suffer on the beach in Hawaii. About 6 years ago, we moved to Africa and started working with a fledgling project at the time with YWAM called Water for Life. And YWAM is, I believe right now it is the single largest evangelical mission organization in the world. And one of the things that makes YWAM unique is that almost all of our staff around the world serve in the countries in which they're from. So when Jen and I and our kids went to Rwanda, we have about 35 staff with YWAM in Rwanda, and there were about 5 of us total that were not from Rwanda. And it's one of the things that, as we've gone through our lives as missionaries, we've come to appreciate that's what makes projects sustainable, is that the people who are doing the work in these countries, this is their home. This is where they were born, this is where they live, this is where they'll die, this is where they'll raise their children. And it really shifted our mentality about what it meant to be missionaries when we came alongside people who that's just where they're from. And we know that we're going to come, we're going to stay, we're going to serve, but eventually we're going to leave. And it shifted the focus of what we're doing to our job as missionaries became to support what they're doing. And that's where the sustainability came in. And it's been a good lesson for us, especially as we're looking at our role in terms of development and water and development. Our job is to help provide clean drinking water, sanitation, and hygiene. But really our job is to come alongside the people who are serving there and will serve in these countries forever, and help them with what they're doing. One of the things that we've had as a neat benefit to living overseas is we've got children who just see the world a little differently. And as our kids have come back at different times over the past 9 years, a lot of you have seen our kids sort of grow up in snapshots, a little bit here, and kind of they're ready for it. The last time I saw you, you were this big, kind of thing, and they get a kick out of it, and it's fun to come back. But one of the things we see is they just have a curiosity about the world that I didn't have when I was growing up, that the world is just so big. The way that we've lived has sort of focused and almost forced an understanding for them of this constant interaction between the spiritual and the physical. It's just a part of going through a day where prayer is just a part of it. It just has to be. And that's been fun to see with our kids. They also have a different sense of poverty than I certainly ever did. When I was a kid, we used to do the thing, I'd sit and I'd say, "Mom, I'm not going to eat the peas." And she'd say, "Don't you know there are children starving in China? Eat the peas." So I tried that a couple of years ago with our kids. Our daughter was probably 4 and our son was 6, and they're generally pretty good adventurous eaters. In this case, whatever it was that we were serving, they just didn't want to eat. And I said, "You just need to eat this. We can't waste this food. There are children starving outside our gate right now." And they knew it was true because they see them, and there was actually a little group of boys that would come almost every day and knock on our gate, and our daughter would run and get it, and she'd go, "The boys are here," and then she'd run back up and she'd make a little, food package and come back down and give it to them. And so I say, "You've got to eat this food. There are children starving in our community. There are kids on our street who haven't eaten today." And our son goes, "Why wouldn't we give them the food then?" And our daughter's like, "Dad, we have to give them the food." And he's like our son kind of looks at our daughter like, "It's all right, I got this. We're not eating this." He's like, "What's wrong with you? Let's go give them the food." And so we don't, that's done. We don't do that one. If they don't want to eat, they don't eat anymore. But it's just a different mindset. A lot of the things that for me growing up, for a lot of us here, seem abstract, for them have been concrete their entire lives. You go through the 10 Commandments in Sunday school, and I remember so many different times having the conversation with the Sunday school teacher from being a little kid on up through college, where they'd say, "Idols. Now, what are some idols? Maybe you really are into video games," right? And our kids were at a VBS 2 summers ago, and they went through this, and they were saying what an idol is, and they came up with, "Maybe you really like your Game Boy or your Xbox," and my son's like, "No, an idol, when you go out to the villages, they have this thing, and it's like in a shrine, and everybody bows down to it. It's not good." And they're like, "Where are you from?" And it's these some neat concrete things that we get that there are other things that I don't like and I wish more for my kids. But as we're walking through this, where God has called us, God takes us, and the blessings are so abundant. We've recently moved from Rwanda to South Africa, and part of that was just looking for a little bit more stability for our family, where we could expand the work that we've been doing in Rwanda for 6 years into other parts of Africa, and do it in a more efficient way. So much of our lives in Rwanda was we wake up in the morning and try to figure out what do we need to do to get through today. And you could, we had another YWAM missionary from Switzerland came down and spent 2 weeks with us, sort of scouting out what he and his family, he had a wife and 2 kids that were a little bit younger than our kids, and they were considering moving to Burundi, which is just 90 miles south of where we live in Rwanda. So he stayed with us for 2 weeks, and he was very interested in the water projects and what does it mean to have a school that didn't have water. You do a project and now the school has water, and that just, there's something about that that just seems awesome. And by the end of 2 weeks, he left and he's like, I think we're good in Switzerland. And it was largely because we were spending so much of every day trying to get through the stuff of the day, and then I'd get out to the project site for maybe an hour. I'd get incredibly dirty, totally tired, wiped out, frustrated, and then I'd go home and there'd be no water, and I'd kind of take a little French bath, and he's like, really, this is how we do it? God bless you, Greeners. And I look at that time period, and I would never, ever take any of it back. Since we've moved to South Africa, we have this strange, there's a strange juxtaposition, I think that's a word, between living in Africa and living in the West. And South Africa has all these things that we never had, like a grocery store, and an auto body shop, with a qualified mechanic for our car, that we didn't have in Rwanda. The first time we got a flat tire in our truck in Rwanda, I brought it to a guy who had a sign that said, "Fix tires," or something along those lines. And he fixes my tire, and I drive out, and I just hear thump, 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 thump. So I went about 100 meters, turn around, and come back, and I look at the tire, and there's a giant, thorn. I mean, it's like the size of this microphone stuck in the tire, and I'm like, really? I just had this fixed. Pull in, and I'm like, I have another thorn, and he's, no, that's how I fixed your tire. So we kind of went back, and I sealed it again. I do things I didn't used to do. I still don't do any electric because it scares me. But I can plumb. I didn't know how to plumb. I used to work at OMB behind a desk with Excel spreadsheets. Now I know how to do basic plumbing, which I had to learn because the first time our sink fell apart, and by fell apart, we had an actual sink with running water in our house, and it collapsed. It was like, the house and, the 3 little pigs, the wolf just blew it down. And I had a plumber come, and I'm trying to talk with our guard about how much it will cost to have him fix the sink, and he's looking at it, and we kind of go back and forth, and he's like, a tall one. I'm like, a tall what? And he's like, beer. I'm like, you're no longer our plumber. He came back and he actually did some other work later, and that's what he wanted, was a tall beer. But I can plumb now. There's things that you're stretched. When I was talking to the missions committee on Friday, I started reflecting afterwards the things that I do now that I never thought I would ever do. Some of them good, some of them odd, but they're all ways that God has stretched us. When I was 15, I grew up in a neat Christian family, wonderful Christian heritage, missionaries going back generations on different sides of our family. And when I was probably about 15, I went through this sort of, I think, a natural progression where I kind of made my faith my own. It was no longer my family's faith, it was mine. And I remember this moment where I'm like, I get it. It's all or nothing. I'm either in or I'm out. God, I'm in. I'll do whatever you want. I will go wherever you want. I will be whatever you want. Please don't send me to Africa. And as the plane was landing in Africa, my first time there to start our work in 2008, I just remember going, man, this is ironic. The irony wasn't I didn't want to go to Africa and God made me go to Africa. I think that's something we sometimes think, what is that thing I love most? I should give that up for God. The irony was there was nothing I wanted to do more than go to Africa. And that was not something that happened overnight. That wasn't, I said that prayer as a 15-year-old and woke up the next day as a 16-year-old wanting to go to Africa. It was just a slow progression of maturing and what does God have for us? What's in front of me? And you know, the phrase you miss the forest for the trees. I'm the opposite. I miss the trees because of the forest all the time. I look at things so broadly, I miss that little thing in front of me. I get scattered and distracted, and I have no idea how long I've been speaking right now, but I've only gone through the first point of my notes, and I don't know why. And that's just something I deal with. I work through it, and it's a part of who I am. But in ministry, it's one of those things where you can miss the little piece of ministry in front of you because you've got the big picture in mind. When I was a senior in high school, I had this perfect plan for Valentine's Day. That it was, I had this illusion that I was the man in high school. And so for Valentine's Day, I decided I would write a Valentine card to every girl in our school. So this is me as a senior. I got the little Snoopy ones, the little Michael Jordan ones, you know. And I wrote I wrote the girl's name, a personal message on the back of every single one, love Nick. To every single, they all had the same message. They all said, her name, you're the only one for me, love Nick. I thought it was funny. So, you know, I go deliver them in the, whatever the group at school is, that's like the smart kids that do smart things. They collected all the Valentines and then they deliver them to everybody. I wasn't in that group, so I just gave them to them and they go do it. Honor Society, I think that's what it's called. It wasn't me. So then throughout the day, as they're being delivered, you know, most everybody got the joke, right? Like I'm walking down the hall and I'm kind of doing my little strut and it's, you know, all these girls are going, hey Nick, I'm the only one for you. And I'm like, right back at ya, Julie. And so I go through my day and at the end of the day I get called into the vice principal's office and not for that, for something else. And I go in there and I'm talking to the vice principal and this girl comes in, girl I'd had a crush on since like grade 8, comes in, and this is probably like me, the closest I've ever been like standing to her in my life, right? And I'm like thinking, I sent her a Valentine's. and she starts talking to the vice principal, and then she stops and she goes, you sent me a Valentine today. And I'm like, yeah. And she says, I want you to know I opened that and I read it and I thought it was the sweetest thing any guy had ever read, you know, written to me. And then I looked and the girl in front of me had one, the girl behind me had one, and then I figured out that every girl in the school had one. I'm like, and then she said her last thing to the vice principal and walked out. And the vice principal looks at me and he goes, well, you blew that one, Greener. And we were on a last name basis, the vice principal and I. And I thought, had I known, I think I actually said, I'm like, had I known that would be what she would have said, I probably wouldn't have sent the other 260. And there's a ministry parallel there somewhere. It it's easy to miss that one thing that we should be doing because we're trying to do this big, broad thing. As we were getting ready to leave to go from Rwanda to South Africa, I felt like this huge overload of things that had to be done to get all of our water projects just right, just perfect before we left. And the list seems overwhelming, and in the middle of it, with about 3 days to go, I get a call from a friend of ours who's another missionary, and they're leaving the country the next day, and she's got 2 girls that live right across from her that are, they were like 7 and 10 at the time. And they were AIDS orphans. They were living in a little shack, and they had about a month left of the rent that was paid on their shack by this other missionary woman whose family was leaving. And she said, I've been trying to get them into this care program that's run by a ministry where they get put into a boarding school that will take them all the way up through high school, feeds them, clothes them. On the breaks, they go stay at like almost like what we'd call like a foster home. And she's like, I cannot get the girls into this program. You know these people, you've done projects for these people. Don't they owe you something? And I'm like, okay, let me see what I can do. And I ended up so frustrated. I spent most of the last 3 days in the country not doing my work. And in the end, here we are, 2 years later, our work is still going on fine in Rwanda. We actually had one of the best, most successful, efficient, effective years in terms of our projects. But these 2 girls are now in a school program. They're housed, they're fed. And at the time, all I could think of was, they're in my way. And how do I get this thing done so that I can go to the work that I'm meant to be doing? And it didn't take long after we left Rwanda for me to think back and go, wait, no, that actually is the ministry. The ministry is the stuff that happens when we're not doing the work. And that's true for me in Africa, it's true for you in America, it's true for all of us everywhere in the church. The ministry is the stuff that happens when we're not really paying attention. It's the thing that we realize later, oh wait, that was the important thing to do. And it's so easy to get bogged down in the details of the stuff that we just are important. But I guess I would just say, to me, that's coming back to the development side, that's sustainability. The sustainability of our water projects isn't how many of our water systems are still operating after 2 years or after 4 years. The sustainability is what happens to the kid who would have got sick and missed 3 months of school and eventually dropped out. What is he doing 5 years later? Okay, because that water system broke down. But that kid, well, now he's in grade 8, and he would have been in grade 3, and he never would have got past grade 3. And it's, talking again the other day with the missions committee, that's really hard to quantify. And it's one of the things where we're good at looking at the important things as a church in the development world. If you can't quantify it, it doesn't count. And I guess if there's anything that I would want to leave everyone with today, it's the stuff that we can't quantify is usually the stuff that counts. That's usually the stuff that matters. we got an email, my wife got an email about 3 or 4 days before I came here from a young missionary who just wrote us a quick note saying, you probably barely remember me, but this is what you did for me and with me and to me as a result of, I think we had her over for cookies one day. And that was it. And it was a little bit inconvenient. But, this is now a year and a half later, and she's saying, that changed my life. So I think as we look at where our church is going as a body, and as we look at where we're going as individuals, it's a journey that's not quantifiable that matters. It's the journey that is the things that have an effect on somebody that a lot of times we don't even know about. It's the stuff that seems like it was inconvenient, but it's the stuff that Jesus did. My favorite story, and I'll just close with this, my favorite story in the Bible always was, always has been, and probably always will be, the story of Zacchaeus. It's the miracle without a miracle. The miracle was in the middle of Jesus' ministry, he decided to have lunch with somebody. And to me, that's just stunning. That's something that we can do. I can be doing all these things with water and health clinics and schools and orphanages, but sometimes it's just sitting with the old guy and looking him in the eye and talking to him, and he's got dignity. That to me is the miracle of the story of Zacchaeus. And what I love about it is it's not supernatural, except that it's totally, completely supernatural. So let's pray. Lord, I am so grateful for this church. We're all grateful. And it is such a joy for me always to be back here. I pray that you will bless this church as it moves forward. And I pray that as we go out as a church body, that we will always be looking for the Zacchaeus around us, that person that we can spend a little bit of time with, that we can give a little bit of dignity, and we can do it in your name. And we do that knowing sometimes it doesn't make a difference, and sometimes it makes all the difference in the world. But we're doing it, and we're doing it in the name of Jesus. And we pray that you guide us through all of that. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.